Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Veterans Today Radio News Reports. I'm your host, Stu Webb, and it's September the 10th, 2014. We're going to have a special show today on the events of September the 11th, 2001, what we've always referred to as 9/11. And we have a special lineup today. First hour, I have Gordon Duff, Senior Editor, Veterans Today. Gene Chip Tatum is also on the line. He's going to be with us a full 2 hours. Hopefully Gordon will also. In the second hour, we're going to have Professor James Fetzer and also CIA whistleblower, UN whistleblower, Susan Lindauer. I don't know that much about Susan. Gene does, Jim does, and so does Gordon. So they're going to be throwing questions as well at her. So she'll be on the second hour. With that said, I know that we have Gene on hold there on the line, and he's going to remain there for a while. But Gordon Duff, how are you today, sir?
Good. I wanted to say hi to Gene. I've started looking through the murder attempt on Louis Freeh, and this is something that Chip had written about earlier. Judge Louis Freeh, former director of the FBI, and I had held off doing this for a couple of days because, for varying reasons, I have a full-time job, and we have affirmed that this was a murder attempt. The methodology used was what we call Boston breaks. Sheriff Larry Deaver was murdered almost identically down in Cochise County, Arizona. Michael Hastings was murdered under almost identical circumstances. I can't even describe the number of people who have been and heaven forbid, Louis Freeh's a tough guy, or he'd be gone. Also, what they try to do in these cases is if you aren't killed, they make sure the first responders will kill you. And this is almost invariably. So if your car suddenly locks up, heads across the road, speeds up because you have a computer system in it, rams into a tree, you will also mysteriously explode, or the first responders will arrive and make sure that your neck is broken. And this is how they killed Larry Deaver, because he crossed the Mexican cartels and Mitt Romney's Mormon financial organization. So he had to be replaced with a local government down there that was much more amenable to narcotics dealing, bribery, and organized crime. And as for the rationale for going after Louis Freeh, this is going to be Chip's area, but we absolutely have been able to confirm the methodology. I have a story for anybody that hasn't looked into this. I think it's called, and you can do a Google search on this, Boston Breaks, No Skid Marks in the Sky. It's several years old. It's a fun read. You'll want to look at this and then listen to what Chip has to say. We're here today to discuss 9/11. This is 13 years. We still have Americans who believe that aluminum airliners can vaporize the largest buildings in the world. Pretty much the same way someday a hard rainfall is going to make the pyramids disappear, or a sunny day will turn the Atlantic Ocean to pea soup, or any other number of things. The idea, if you believe in 9/11, the ideas of the biblical plagues has really got to be minor to you. Belief in total magic. We have to step back and step back and step back and step back to just understand things. There was a kind of a great disaster during the Clinton administration that just, there was a need to get Clinton out of office. There was an attempt to impeach him. He certainly would have been killed if he didn't have powerful friends. They would have murdered Clinton. When his wife said a few things about a great right-wing conspiracy, she was speaking some of the little truth you will ever get out of Washington. Other than out of Jimmy Carter, by the way, who will periodically tell the truth and does so more often than not. Now, what Clinton had done wrong, of course, is that he got into office, and I will tell you that Bush lasted his 4 years, and if it weren't for death threats made against Ross Perot would have been president. Ross Perot, frankly, Bush would have come in a distant third. Clinton would have come in a distant second. And I think Chip can talk about that also. He has some personal knowledge about that. I don't know if he wants to let that out, but this was and frankly, after 2000 election, Al Gore was similar. He and his family were threatened by organized crime. Organized crime being the secret government of the United States is organized crime. 9/11, the things that the Clinton administration had done some horrible things. They had cut the size of the military. The U.S. was respected around the world. Unemployment was plunging to nothing. We had budget surpluses. We were paying off our national debt. That's the nightmare. Freedom from national debt. We were putting ourselves in a position to be able, Clinton was very much putting us in a position to be able to get out of the Federal Reserve. If there is anything that is responsible for whatever evil there is in this world, the Federal Reserve is very much a part of it. The Federal Reserve, the IMF, the currency debt banking syndrome that we have, based on having created, let's say, we have a world economy that is created out of nothing but hot air, imaginary debt, imaginary technologies. We're still operating with 18th century technologies that Tesla taught us we don't need wires for electricity. We've recently published articles from Los Alamos Labs showing that the U.S. has known for years that we've never needed to use these for transmission. We have long had free power available. The wars that we're continually fighting, in this case, the Cold War had come to an end. Now, the Bush family had set up the Gulf War. They had, as Ron Paul and WikiLeaks had reported, had given Saddam the go-ahead to invade Kuwait, and Kuwait had been stealing Iraqi oil. Kuwait was one of the most brutal dictatorships on earth, and I will tell you that life under Saddam Hussein in Iraq was 1,000 times better than it is today. Well, Saddam was given the okay, went into Kuwait. When the U.S. went after him with our coalition of the willing, we have also found from our friends at Sandia Labs and the IAEA that we didn't drop daisy cutters on Saddam. We hit him with nuclear weapons. In 1991, many of them. We dropped them on the Republican Guard. When we duplicated the same effort years later, we did the same thing with nuclear weapons. Now we're talking about 9/11. We take the clock back to June. Now this is an interesting point. Let's describe what a conspiracy theory is. A conspiracy theory. Now let's take this one look at what the news is. Now, if you want to be slapped down, all you have to say is the Jews control the press, and you're slapped down. Or you can be perhaps more politically correct, and say that the Zionists control the world press. They control Hollywood. And frankly, I would think an absolute shitstorm should come up and just crush the life out of you for saying this. Now, it's 100% true. That's why it's such a dangerous thing. And It's not just true. The names are all published everywhere. We know who the people are. We know that Zionists control Hollywood. They control the networks. They control the newspapers in the U.S. We see it every single day. We know who the people are. Proving it is, there's nothing to proving it. It's been proven so many times. But then saying it is such a horrible thing. Why is saying it a horrible thing? Because it's true. If it weren't true, it wouldn't matter. What we know is that the media, if you haven't guessed by now, and the way Americans have abandoned the mainstream media for what has turned into, and I'll give you a little clue on this, if you thought the Zionists taking over the mainstream media, which took them decades, they had to have laws changed to create the Murdoch Fox News monstrosity, which includes the New York Daily News and the Wall Street Journal, which is only just a part of this. That took a tremendous amount of work. That took a tremendous effort to undermine that much of the United States and to enslave us to propaganda. That took a lot. But Americans pretty much know that the mainstream news is controlled and can't be trusted. Americans have abandoned it. This radio broadcast will receive more listeners right now than any TV broadcast, any news broadcast, including the show 60 Minutes. We'll have more listeners than they'll have viewers right now. Here's my point about what is a conspiracy. If you know the mainstream news lies consistently, and it does, why then does something that we publish here through Veterans Today and a very few other publications that have been able to stand against being bought, threatened, or blackmailed? And we're not entirely powerless. But why is anything that we do a conspiracy theory unless it's certified by people that all of us agree are propagandists and liars? So if I publish a story, unless CNN or Fox News or ABC or NBC, people that you wouldn't trust to take care of a pet black widow spider, unless they certify it as being okay, it's a conspiracy theory. So let me get this straight. The truth is a lie unless liars say that it's true. And that's pretty much how we have to explain the ideas of 9/11. That what we say about 9/11, no matter how much hard proof we have, and we're drowning in it now, that it's not true until a liar says it's true. If I have to answer another question about conspiracy theories under those circumstances, shoot me, please. It'd be a godsend. Let's go back to June this year. Veterans Today was contacted by Russian naval intelligence in June. Edward Snowden had turned over to Russia as the price of, and you notice you haven't seen any real Snowden leaks. Why is he in Russia? Oh, the NSA is spying. Yeah. We created the NSA, gave them $18 billion a year. We passed laws that legalized tapping telephones and reading everybody's email anyway. And then when they do that, it's a big shock and somehow it's big news. No, Snowden had nothing to do with that. And we're always glad to put useless, absolutely useless baloney like this in the news. The NSA has said we spied on the Germans. Does anybody care if we listen to what some German leader said? Not anybody I know. It lasted what? They tried to run the story. Nobody'd read it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about it at all. What Snowden brought in was the real 9/11 report. Now, the one that nobody's read the real 9/11 report supposedly is the one that was written in 2005 where the people on the 9/11 Commission all said it was a total lie and asked for the witnesses to be prosecuted. And then, of course, they went out and wrote books about it, like John Farmer. And then, of course, John Farmer was made dean of the law school at Duke, and we haven't heard from him since. Wonder how things like that happen. The real 9/11 report was written in 2003 at a proper time after investigations. Let me tell you about what happened in 9/11. On 9/11, there was an organizational meeting in New York of a UN group that investigates nuclear proliferation. It's called the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's a UN agency. It was briefing the United Nations. The IAEA investigates everyone. And the thing is, it watches all nuclear reactors. It watches all weapons programs. It tracks down its agents, and the real James Bond types, heaven forbid, are also nerd physicists who track down people like Victor Boot or the Mossad or groups within the CIA and, as frankly, the CIA/Bush family that sell nuclear weapons. Whatever you think you've heard about what nuclear weapons are, you know nothing unless you've read what we've published from the national labs on Veterans Today. We'll get into a little more of that. If you think you know about how many nuclear weapons are floating around out there, well, we received documents yesterday that the government of Japan has 80 tons of weapons-grade plutonium that can make, if you are making small nuclear weapons, and this is typically, we are making 1 kiloton nukes now. The real nuclear weapons we make are 1 kiloton, 1,000 tons of TNT. Japan's plutonium stockpile is capable of building 18,000 1-kiloton weapons, 18,000 of them. And we published yesterday articles proving it, conclusively proving how it was done, how the U.S. was involved in making sure they had this much weapons-grade plutonium. And right now, with the relationship between Japan and China, Japan is considering quickly converting this all into active weapons. And by converting, I'm saying they've built the nuclear weapons. The 18,000 tons, well, a lot of it is already machined into pits. And all it has to be is dropped into their stockpiles of nuclear weapons that were built long ago. And the Japanese claim that they can not just build better ones than we do, they're threatening to start marketing their own fighter planes. And they have several models which they could put on the market if they were allowed, that make the F-35 the U.S. failure. I call it the flying dump truck. That would make it the joke we know it to really be. Let's go back to 9/11 here. The IAEA was meeting in New York. Well, 9/11 happened. The hijackers, the airplanes, these buildings, massive explosions, not only took down buildings that planes supposedly hit, and I'll tell you, when I look at a video of something, whether somebody's head cut off or a plane or whatever, or a UFO, I don't believe anything I see on video. Computer-generated graphics can do anything. Well, everyone saw it. I didn't see it. You know, I didn't see anything. I wasn't there. And if a plane were moving at 560 miles an hour, 500 feet off the ground, people would have had a tenth of a second to see it. They wouldn't have known well, we all saw it. We saw something. Am I going to stick on this issue? No. Was there a plane or not? I don't care. I can tell you this, that if the world's largest airplane, or if 1,000 of them crashed into the World Trade Center, the building would be a horrible mess. and it would have taken them months to repair the damage. There would have not been an iota of structural damage to the building if 500 Airbus 380s or 747-800s had hit the World Trade Center, 500 of them. They would have had to fix the building. Not a single beam would have been dent, damaged, scratched maybe, because the engines have some very, very crispy little parts that can scratch steel. Scratch. Cut? No. Dissolve? No. The IAEA. People from the IAEA immediately went to ground zero and detected radiation. Soon afterwards, a combination of the IAEA and the American Nuclear Weapons Labs, and the people who work for the IAEA have to be people who know nuclear weapons. The only people that know nuclear weapons are people who have built them. If you're a physicist and you've never touched an A-bomb, you won't know a damn thing about how to really make one. This is one of the things that we exposed at Veterans Today a couple of years ago when Clinton Baston, former chief nuclear weapons designer for the Department of Energy, who died a year ago, had written about the Iranian nuclear weapons program, that people who wrote about it, that none of these people, one of the guys was a publicist, the go-to guy for the New York Times, and he was describing, there are two basic types of earlier weapons. One is an implosion device, one is a gun device. Well, he described the Pakistanis as using a gun device with a solid core. Now, I don't know if you understand this, but a compressed uranium or plutonium core, if it is of a singular size that reaches what we call critical mass, the idea of actually making a weapon explode is by taking separate parts and either compressing them. And this is using high explosives. In the early weapons, 4.5 tons of high explosives were needed to do that. You see this on the TV show Manhattan, by the way. If you don't watch it, I'm saying watch it. Or by taking separate parts and blasting them together so that they compress. Here's the problem. If you actually made a compressed core, in the process of making the compressed core, you would have not only made a nuclear weapon, you would have also exploded a nuclear weapon. No one has ever lived making a solid compressed plutonium or uranium-235 core of sufficient size for critical mass, unless, of course, you're one of the people the newspapers hired as physicists to describe nuclear weapons. You have that many people out there who are just that dumb. Well, the group of people we're talking about here, and this was in that report that Snowden turned in to the Russians, it was 75 meg of documents. And the information within the report indicated this, that 2 specialized neutron bombs were located within specific parking lots under the Twin Towers, and that higher up within the Twin Towers, smaller neutron weapons, some that inside a building would make almost no noise or flash at all, were in elevator equipment rooms that dissolved sections of the building so that it would just fall like dust, and there would be almost no wreckage, which anybody may have noticed here, making a pop, pop, pop noise. And that other buildings, like Building 7, had singular nuclear weapons under them. And within this study, which we published, were U.S. government studies on how to use nuclear weapons to destroy buildings, with drawings supplied by the U.S. government showing a building that looked exactly like Building 7, with a nuclear weapon placed underneath it, and showing how that building could be destroyed easily and efficiently doing this. Along with this, we had the supporting papers, some that went back to 1945, some were partially redacted, some had been declassified, explaining how the weapons would work. We also published the specific designs for the nuclear weapons. And we removed some of the most classified material, but we left in a tremendous amount of highly classified material, and we published it. Few classified, highly classified on Veterans Today. We published a ton of it, more information about nuclear weapons than has come out in 60 years, including the designs of our most advanced weapons, with enough information changed by the physicists who gave us the information to make sure that it couldn't be used by some idiot to make their own nuclear weapon. One of the descriptions we had by one of the nuclear weapons designers who helped us with the project is that by today's standards, we have advanced scientifically so far that you can make a nuclear weapon out of 5% reactor fuel and equipment that any automotive service facility has. You can make a nuclear weapon. It's called the flying plate design for anybody that has an interest in this. Well, in 2003, this report went to the President, his cabinet, key leaders in Congress, key leaders in the Pentagon, and to specific federal judges who were tasked to kill any criminal case or any civil case involving 9/11. And this report stated that the World Trade Center was destroyed with nuclear weapons that used uranium and plutonium from the Hanford U.S. facility.
Hang on, Gordon. Hold the thought. We'll be right back. We've got to take a break. Now we're back, folks. This is Veterans Today Radio News Reports. I'm your host, Stu Webb. I have Gordon Duff, Senior Editor, Veterans Today. Now, I want to say something, folks. What this man's telling you about 911, you need to open up your ears and your brain, because this comes right out of U.S. intelligence. This we have today. Gordon Duff used to be working for the CIA. I won't say no more. Gene Chip Tatum, whistleblower, CIA. Susan Landau, former CIA. You're hearing it right out of the mouth of professionals. Go ahead, Gordon. Would you pick up where you left off, please?
What we've done under a series of articles at Veterans Today, we have published as much as possible. And there are areas of the 2003 9/11 report that, because it was that classified, some of the things in this report included specifics of weapons design and formulas. And these formulas, this is kind of the point we have about non-proliferation. When people leak things, there is no consideration for putting out information that is actually dangerous to the world. And one of the toughest things here, and why I keep nuclear physicists around, we demonstrate that we have the ability. Veterans Today has the ability to have its own nuclear program. We have the top nuclear weapons designers in the world working with us at Veterans Today. And we demonstrate it to, and we just pick on all comers, to any physicist anywhere. We not only can demonstrate it, we will demonstrate it, that we know more about nuclear weapons, the design of nuclear weapons, of advances in physics that make what they teach at universities a joke. And none of this is going into fringe. We have the photos, we have the designs, we have the math, and we publish the math. The problem in doing so is I'm publishing materials that not 500 people in the world understand. We try to explain them as best we can, and I'll tell you, I'm a little lead engineer, and we leave me behind math-wise way behind. But we have left this open to where we answer any question for any qualified comer, and we've been pushed on this. But we publish the formulas, we publish the designs, we publish the math. We are just not going to hand out directions on how any idiot can build a nuclear weapon. And the problem is any idiot can build a nuclear weapon today. And that's quite a danger. We've also explained the real changes in U.S. defense policy. We go back to 9/11. I started this by saying you stand back and you stand back and you stand. Why would somebody do this? Why would Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and, you know, the people everyone names, and the Israelis, and, well, one of the things we've published on extensively is we've received documents from the IAEA. We have cited that 1/3 of America's nuclear inventory, we have this published from the IAEA, is missing. That we do audits. Well, we have an audit document, and I have this the article on Veterans Day is written by IAEA officials stating specifically how between the Department of Energy and the U.S. military, when they move nuclear weapons-grade material around, they don't keep track of any of it. And how nuclear pits that are supposed to be made into fuel for reactors like Fukushima are actually remachined and sold on the open market. And how countries like Taiwan, South Korea, Brazil, and others, Saudi Arabia, why they have 11 nuclear weapons now. Because friends of the Saudi royal family, I won't say it was the Bush family, it was the Bush family, simply gave them nuclear pits designed and initiators to build the nuclear weapons because they wanted to have them. Now, here's the other point. The Saudis haven't told anybody they have them, and they haven't threatened anybody with them, and they haven't used them. Do I have a problem with them having them? Truthfully, no. The United States has nuclear weapons. We dropped them on Afghanistan. I can prove we have used nuclear weapons multiple times in Afghanistan. What we've had come forward in the last month or so, we have members of the military who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. These are simple Marine enlisted non-commissioned officers who have been briefed that we were using low-yield nuclear weapons against the Taliban, against the Republican, that we've used them on more than a few occasions, and the military, and there are literally thousands of people out there who are briefed on this. Well, why would they not tell the story? And let's go into another thing here. Now, we know that over 90%, well over 90% of the world's heroin supply, not opium, heroin, comes out of Afghanistan. And that the U.S. has had virtual control over that entire process. Anyone who thinks that the Taliban was running transport planes out of U.S.-controlled air bases delivering heroin to the United States and to Russia, flying it into Brussels, if you really think that, then you believe airliners can knock down the largest buildings in the world. But we don't have a single photo of a heroin processing facility. We don't have a single photo of a bale of heroin being moved anywhere. But I have personally interviewed ranking Navy SEAL personnel who have described loading heroin on American long-range, ultra-high altitude Global Hawks that have been flown all the way back to the United States from Pakistan. People who were there, I've met with and talked to. They're aware of it. They know it. They did it. They saw the trucks come in. I can show you where they took off from. I can show you the landing. I can show you where the heroin producing facilities are, how the trucks got through. And tens of thousands of people could have photographed this process. could have dragged their iPhone out. I was in Nigeria, a couple of years ago. There are a lot of poor people living around Abuja, the capital of Nigeria. It was the morning. I was out driving around, and I watched someone who actually was sleeping in a culvert. Young person, 18, 19 years old, living in destitute poverty. I watched him come out of a culvert, and the first thing he did was take out an iPhone and check his email. I've just entered the other side of the mirror here. There's a lot of Africa there. And know why on this? You know, you think about it. Sleep in a culvert and have an iPhone and be part of the world and have a family and have friends and belong to things? Yeah, it means that much to a lot of people. But in this case, no one in Afghanistan ever photographed anything. And God only knows what Chip and I can tell you about the U.S. and narcotics running. But, you know, we talk about Iran-Contra. It was my job to interview the pilots. I can tell you who ran the front company, a detective agency out of Nashville. I could mention the names of the individuals who ran the detective agency. I could say that the cover company was a large American insurance company that was also involved in handling funds to pay off people involved in 9/11. You'll have people on today who could tell you all of this and so much more that CNN will never publish. And these aren't things I read about. I sat at the table and did all this. Did it as you'll have Chip sat at the table and did it. You'll have Susan here. We sat at the table and did this. We were there for all of this for so many years. And because CNN, let's go back to the 9/11 report of 2003. The Russians sent it to CNN. Now, if we remember from WikiLeaks, we knew that Julian Assange turned his leaks over to the New York Times. They selected the ones they wanted published. And who helped them select this, if you remember the story, they called the Israeli consulate. The Israeli consulate sent an intelligence team down that helped them pick the leaks out. And then, in 2010, December 3rd, on National Public Radio, National Security Advisor to, and Director of the Council on Foreign Relations, Zbigniew Brzezinski, was interviewed by Julie Woodruff. And in that interview, he said that WikiLeaks was fronting for an intelligence agency, and that most of what they turned out was chicken feed, and the other was pointed material created. So WikiLeaks and Assange, we call this a limited hangout. Originally, we thought they're anti-war, they're pro-this, pro-that, the Icelandic government's protecting them, and yet WikiLeaks is pro-war. WikiLeaks supports, well, you never heard WikiLeaks say anything about the war in Gaza and the 570 dead kids. Never a word about that. Never a word of criticism. Never a single word came out of WikiLeaks about Israel. Never a word about anything they've done. WikiLeaks is very much a tool. Israeli intelligence, right-wing extremists, and global oligarchs. They put out enough chicken feed material to buy their way in, and then they insert the poison. And this is what we're getting everywhere. Take a strong look at InfoWars and see how they're buying you as an audience. Then go back to Fox News, and I'll call them the predecessor of InfoWars. Everything they learned in the failure and burnout of Fox News and Hannity and the other gang around them, they think they're doing it a lot better now. And you look at what's not there, the stories that aren't told. And there are lots and lots and lots of stories that aren't told. 9/11, we step back. It's very, very simple. We needed an enemy. One was created. You know, anybody who thinks that Al-Qaeda was involved in 9/11, then how in the name of God would John McCain and McInerney and Paul Vallely and the gang from Fox News, why do these guys run to Syria and meet with Al-Qaeda? Why does the U.S. supposedly set up training camps for them across Jordan? Why do they receive weapons delivered in the Black Sea and trucked across Turkey, which is a NATO nation? And maybe Susan Lindauer can talk about this. ISIS and al-Nusra were all supposedly Al-Qaeda. We heard this every day. They're Al-Qaeda. Now we don't hear it anymore. Now that word's been removed, especially since all the photos of John McCain or General Vallely or others coaching and advising Al-Qaeda come out. And now that they're on TV cutting people's heads off, real or imagined, I don't believe anything I see in the video. There was no Al-Qaeda in 1993. There was no Al-Qaeda in 2001. It was all a CIA organization. Lee Wanta spilled the beans on this. We have meetings where supposedly we were hunting down Osama bin Laden, and he was going to meetings in Washington at the Metropolitan Club and staying in the Mayflower Hotel. We have the number of the suite. We've listed the people at the meetings. We've listed specific things that came up, including where one person had their room robbed, an attorney for the Bush family meeting with them. We have specifics of Osama bin Laden while he was being hunted down in Sudan, him flying into an airport on the outskirts of Los Angeles and list the people who were there to meet him, including among others, Ollie North was with the group, meeting Osama bin Laden. The guy that he had to have a huge fence built around his home to protect him from Osama bin Laden. Was bin Laden his house guest? I can't say that. Did he meet Al-Qaeda? Did he meet bin Laden? Well, the only reason I know is because I interviewed someone that was standing next to him in the meeting. Now, why don't we bring this out? Why don't we bring him on and bring on Lee Wanta and have the meeting at the Ontario airport described while bin Laden was being hunted down by the bin Laden unit and all these would-be whistleblowers that talk about hunting Osama bin Laden. We have people who were there. In this case, former National Intelligence Coordinator for President Reagan was there at the time. We can name everyone. We can name what was discussed. We can talk about lots of meetings between the CIA and Osama bin Laden while he was supposedly our enemy. One of the things I tried to figure out long ago is, well, when did Osama bin Laden turn bad? When did he become an enemy of the U.S.? He was never an enemy of the U.S. He always worked for the CIA. He always worked for the CIA until he died, December 13th, 2001. Until he died. Then, years early, 9/11? 9/11 is not just one scam. 9/11 was a full takeover of the United States. After 9/11, we passed Patriot Acts. We withdrew habeas corpus. We put an end to the U.S. Constitution, and President Obama has not restored it. If you do not have habeas corpus, you have none of the rights guaranteed by Magna Carta. You have no individual rights at all. You have no right to due process. There is no human right. There is no constitutional right without the right to due process. The entire Bill of Rights is predicated on it. If you think you have First Amendment rights, you think you can have your gun, Second Amendment rights, well, frankly, people can take you out of your home and hold you indefinitely without trial or try you in front of a military tribunal, and prior to that, torture you as long as they want to. And you're worried about having your guns? When they don't have to take your guns, they can take you. This is why I don't like the National Rifle Association. This is why they're such a scam. Why worry about protecting our guns? It's us. We're the ones that need protecting. We're the ones that can be taken at any time. When they suspended, this is the National Defense Authorization Act, when they suspended habeas corpus, any American who isn't carrying a valid passport and is prepared to prove his citizenship can be held indefinitely without trial. And that includes you are not allowed legal counsel. You are not allowed to prove your citizenship. And you can receive enhanced interrogation for years and years and years, tortured every day. And we didn't just waterboard people. We used to take people in Afghanistan, we would tie them behind Humvees and drag them through the rocks. We killed hundreds. We would have people kidnapped and held in secret prisons, and not just in Bagram or in Poland. We have secret prisons on RAF bases. We have secret prisons in U.S. Embassy annexes, which I've seen personally. Don't photograph because it's against the law. Will not tell you where they are. That's against the law. I've seen them. I've had my car parked. I've had them drag prisoners on U.S. military bases, which I have full access to. I've had them drag prisoners past me into secret compounds. I'm not going to say where, but I've seen it. I've been there in places where no one would imagine they exist. We have a gulag. Years ago, Solzhenitsyn wrote 2 books on what they call the Gulag Archipelago, describing the Russian prison system as though it were a series of islands living within the huge Russian Empire. Well, the U.S. under Bush created a Gulag Archipelago around the world of secret prisons and torture facilities, and we have no idea who's in these, how many Americans are in these, how many political enemies, how many financial enemies are in these, how many have been murdered, where people go. We have no accounting, except that we know they exist, and you can go on Google Earth and look for these specific areas inside Poland, and they just put clouds over them, or they pepper in the appearance of trees. We have these in Romania. We found that the United States is running chemical and biological weapons facilities. We've got one called the Luger Labs in Tbilisi, Georgia. We've got another one in Kazakhstan. We've got one in Bulgaria. When we wonder about where Ebola comes from, when we wonder about where poison gas comes from, and how do we know about these facilities? Because we've interviewed not the scientists or the people from Bechtel Corporation that built these illegal plants. We interviewed the people who take the trash out, who drive the trucks, who clean the petri dishes where they are growing Ebola. We interview those people because we have people there, and we've published on this, and we've done. And will any of it ever see anywhere? As far as that controlled news, it's got to be a conspiracy theory, even though we have all of the evidence in the world, even though we're there, even though we have the documents. You know, it's interesting, the Bechtel people responsible for building the biochemical weapon facility in Georgia, we initially got the information on them from young ladies that they had met in a bar. And from there, it took us almost nothing to find the disaffected employees. The Russian government demanded an inspection of the facility. And so over a period of weeks, and of course this was supposed to be a medical facility run by people whose life was involved in the secret police, certainly people who had worked with the CIA, but with Georgian secret police, ran a medical facility. Well, hiding the evidence, trucking it out to U.S. transport planes. They hired our people to do it. It's fascinating.
Right there. Hold it up. We have to go to break. We'll be right back with Gordon Duff. Back. This is the Veterans Today Radio News Report. I'm your host, Stu Webb, and I have special guests Gordon Duff and Jean Chip Tatum, and we're supposed to have Susan Landauer on. She hasn't called in yet. She's not answering her other way of communications yet, so we'll hope she'll be here. But with that said, Gordon, pick up where you left off, would you please, sir?
Well, no, let me do this. I've been here for an hour. People get to hear enough of me. We opened a number of things up to Chip. We've crossed paths more than once in life here. It's time that Chip was able to take over, and that in the background, do what you can to get a hold of Susan. But I'm not gonna leave somebody with Chip's qualifications out there as a listener when he ought to be doing the talking.
Well, if you want to stay with us, you can help sit here and throw some questions. Remember, this is open mic, Gordon. This is what the show's about.
I'm gonna hold on here, but we're gonna let Chip and you run with this because hey, the audience deserves the best they can get here today. This is a big story day, and let's put Chip on.
Chip, are you there?
I am. Gordon, Stu, now, let me tell you, listening to you guys the first hour, what a magnificent show. You guys have put so much information out there. Gordon, you put so much out there that I don't know how a person can keep their eyes closed to what has gone on. And one thing I wanted to hit was, I'm very familiar with the Global Hawk system, and the new Global Hawk 20 carries a 3,000-pound payload. If you dropped out like one of the integrated sensor suites that's on that thing, you got about 1,300 kilos of product you can put in there for one flight on the Global Hawk, coming back from Afghanistan back to the U.S., whether it's landing in Georgia or wherever, to offload. 1,300 kilos of heroin runs around $130 million. So you can't tell me that that's not going to buy loyalty from a whole lot of people. I just can't imagine that there would be eyes closed to that. When I came back from to the United States, I was held in a place called Miami Federal Detention Center because I'd been living in South America for so long. I'd violated the dictates of my probation by leaving the country. Had my son born, so I came back to get his citizenship. And when I got back, the 12 federal officials, even though they knew I was coming back because I went to the embassy in Colombia, in Bogota, and told them, okay, guys, you win. I'm going to go on back, and I'm going to turn myself in. They had 12 federal officers waiting for me at the gate, handcuffed me, and paraded me through the several areas of the airport, handcuffed and surrounded as if I were a huge terrorist. I'm still laughing over the way they played that game. But when I did come back, you made me lose my train of thought. When I came back, with all those federal officers there, I was reminded of how things had changed in the United States. When we would pick people up, it would just be a couple of us picking someone up, but they're putting on these grand shows. As a former air traffic controller and combat controller and pilot, I can tell you now that in the 80s and air traffic control guidelines, we always worried, and let me do this build up to 9/11. We always worried, or we were always taught in air traffic control, that one of the biggest catastrophes we could have is if someone hijacked an airliner and flew that airliner into a major landmark. Now that started in the mid '80s. I'd say about '86 that started in our standard operating procedures manuals and briefings and things like that. But they never really gave us a resolve. What are we going to do about this? How do we handle this? In the '90s, there came some resolve, and what I've done is I've taken, now those are pretty sensitive manuals that I put online on chiptatum.com under the free download section. Just go to chiptatum.com download, and you can download the military and the civilian instructions they have under hijackings. There's post 9/11 instructions and a pre 9/11 instructions. And on the air traffic control side, it's pretty confusing because look, in aircraft, folks, we're going to get back to transponders again. We've heard about transponders since the Flight 370 and how they just disappeared with the transponder. Well, a transponder is the true link that a pilot has with air traffic control, and what the true link that air traffic controllers have with the aircraft and the pilot. Without that transponder, it can be a blind flight. There are backup systems without a transponder, and that's a voice. With transponders, we have emergency codes. A pilot can squawk, say, 7700 for a regular emergency, and we have guidelines we go by as an air traffic controller to respond to that 7700 squawk. And it's written down. You do this, you do this, you do this, then this, then this, then this, and this. I mean, it's very specific. We have the squawk 7600 for loss of communications. If you've tried it, say you're trying to talk to them and you can't get an answer, and you see a squawk of 7600, you know that their radios are out for some reason. Could be a lightning strike, could be electrical failure of some sort. So you know, okay, now this is how we're going to handle this, and we had specific guidelines. But we never really had specific guidelines written for a 7500 squawk, which is a squawk for hijacking or skyjacking, they call it today. So how did we do that? How did we handle that? Well, pre 9/11, I guess in about 1998, procedures came out on how to handle that. And I'm going to say that because we had a series of hijackings, and normally a hijacking aircraft would be hijacked, and it would be flown to a particular destination like Cuba, and the hijackers would get off, and they'd be free from American chains of custody and so forth, or they would want to fly to Lebanon, and their demand is we want so many prisoners released, or we're going to kill the passengers. I mean, there was usually a long period of time between the hijacking and us being advised that there is a hijacking and the time to respond. And normally, it's up to the air traffic controller. And even today, it's up to the air traffic controller. If there's not a 7700 squawk or a 7500 squawk coming through to us that a hijacking has taken place, then all we can do is if we see that aircraft going off course, out of altitude, we can do a verbal query. And there's certain, and I'm not going to bring this up because it would endanger air flight if I revealed the verbal codes that we use. There are certain sentences, certain words we use with the pilot, and the pilot is trained to respond in a certain way if the hijacking is true or if they're okay. But without that verbal communication, we see it veering off. It takes us a little bit of time to ascertain that has been a hijacking and that there could be danger. And then once the FAA controller decides that, he turns it on to a supervisor. The supervisor turns it on to Washington, to the duty officer in Washington, and then they advise NORAD. NORAD puts an aircraft up, and so you can see, just running from, as a pilot, military pilot, just running from the standby area out to get into the aircraft, you're talking about 5 to 7 minutes before that aircraft's off the ground. So you don't have a whole lot of time in a situation like what happened in 9/11, and especially since we were trained as air traffic controllers that if there is a hijacking, and it's, you know, it will probably be terrorists taking over this aircraft. And I mean, they built it up. They built it up so huge that as an air traffic controller, you think, wow, I got this. It's terrorists hijacking this aircraft. And so all your interviews, everything after that is, it's terrorists hijacking this aircraft. It's terrorists hijacking this aircraft. The terrorists have taken over this American Airlines flight. The terrorists have done this. It's all built in to the system. The whole thing was built into the system prior to September 11th. That's all I'm trying to get across here, is the mindset of the controllers, which was preset in us prior to that, and the inability to react quickly simply because there wasn't a 7500 squawk that we were to respond to. So not being able to respond immediately to a 7500 squawk, it caused substantial delays. Now, I can't tell you...
Chip, let me jump in on you here, okay? These hijackings, as we've had them described to us by the, I'll call them the mythologists, each one of them involved passengers that typically weighed 120 pounds, getting a box cutter out from under their seat that was hidden there by people that we've never found out who did that, by the way. They got a free ride somehow on that. Nobody ever asked who put the box cutters. Funny, it's another one of the things we covered up, like the other people arrested at Sandy Hook who disappeared from the planet, but that's neither here nor there. But we've got this scenario. You're a pilot. You're sitting there, and you've got passengers screaming. You're watching the plane, of course, on video. You know, it's like you can't see the passenger compartment on video from the cockpit, you know, and you've got somebody sitting there with a bunch of passengers, you're in my size, of course, and they've already slit the throat of a stewardess. You know, we've been told. This is that scenario that we were fed. At some point within that process while you're watching this, is there a chance that you might have squawked that a hijacking's going on?
Even without a squawk button, it only takes a couple seconds to dial that to 7,700 or 7,500.
And so there is no chance whatsoever, and yet we were told out of 4 aircraft, and one of them crashed without leaving any wreckage whatsoever. Of course, the Pentagon plane apparently never left any wreckage whatsoever either. They photoshopped some in it a couple of days later, but there was no wreckage. But supposedly out of 4 planes, we had 1 F-16 scramble. Now, I live probably about 5 miles from an International Guard base, one of the many bases that keeps planes available to hunt down these issues. We have them all across the United States. Most are Air National Guard bases, but within 100 miles of me, within 150 miles of me, I only know of 5 bases where we keep hot fighters on a runway. Within 150 miles, these are all things with an afterburner capability that can do an intercept at well over 1,000 miles an hour. Fuel's not an issue when you're inside the United States doing an intercept. That intercept will be done at multiples of the speed of an airliner, especially if you've got an F-15, and some of what we keep hot are F-15s, F-15s, F-16s. You look at the options here. Shouldn't every aspect of 9/11, I mean, just from the seconds alone of planes that, and these things, heavenly knows, these are things, some of them had been flying around, apparently landing and taking off again out of Pennsylvania, I'm certainly led to believe. But these planes have been flopping around for a long time. Certainly, supposedly, one that's, as we've been told, was being clocked flying into Washington, D.C. something I just might add here. I've got a favorite video game. It's called Fallout 3. Video games like the Call of Duty and Fallout games get a lot of cooperation from people within the military. So America's defense systems, how an Aegis system works, or the real defenses around the Pentagon, are made available in these games. Fallout 3 shows you a Pentagon that's been blown up in a post-apocalyptic world, and as you go through it, you see the defense systems, which included not just buildings in Washington long since have had people with Stinger missiles, but missile defenses around Washington have existed for some number of years. Plus, of course, the Pentagon. The risk at the Pentagon long ago, and the British had learned this from some of their problems with the IRA, we had developed a kinetic curtain defense system. Chip, do you have any experience with kinetic curtain defenses?
No, I don't.
Well, the kinetic curtain defense is designed, and this was the risk at the Pentagon. We were afraid somebody was going to come around there with a van, jump out the back, and hit the building with an RPG. And that was the most likely terror attack. We had two things: an RPG, and the other one was crashing an airliner into it. Those were the two. The RPG would have been stopped by the kinetic curtain defense, and that fires. That's a defense that is on every wall of the Pentagon that will hit a warhead from an RPG or an incoming missile or aircraft, by the way, which won't have quite the same effect, with kinetic bolts. We have the Israelis use a similar defense system on their Merkava tanks. This was developed by Raytheon, but it's a kinetic curtain, and if you fire, a rocket, missile, or projectile at the Pentagon, and I don't recommend anyone do this, you will see from a launching system that is not visible to the public, you'll see it being hit. You will also find that around the Pentagon, there are numerous air defense batteries in place around the Pentagon, and if a plane were coming towards the Pentagon, I assure you the Pentagon has the ability, coordinated with the Aegis system that the U.S. had in place in New Jersey, plus the two offshore Aegis ships, with phased array radar, that the Pentagon has the facilities to shoot down a cruise missile, any aircraft, or an ICBM heading toward the Pentagon, busting through the stratosphere. It has that capability. The launch systems are in place, have been in place since probably about 1993. I'm wondering if I should publish them, because I can certainly get the plans. We have that available, and I'm wondering whether that is, is you're withholding other things. And this is one of the things we do at Veterans Today, because we have so much access. We have to decide what to withhold. But
well, I know, Gordon, that one of the main systems that they use also is a toggler system, where it toggles the eye of the missile or the inbound detonation device, so that it moves it to a different destination, called the toggler. It's a great device.
I think we had gone through this, and to some degree we had looked at the spoofing systems that are also available on aircraft. And that's another thing I'm sure we need to talk about that day. Let me turn things back over to you here and let you go on.
Well, I had just wanted to talk about on our side as controllers how we were prepared to accept that anything that happened like this, and that it probably would happen. That's the thing. We were taught that this is probably going to happen, but there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do about it, you know. And what do you know? Here you're sitting in a position, you start realizing that this aircraft is going off course. Communications is lost with this aircraft. They're not saying anything. What do you do as an air traffic controller? You sit there and you say, hey, boss, you tell your supervisor, we got a problem over here. He's moving off course. The boss says, okay, well, just keep an eye on it and let me know if he gets too far off course. And, you know, there's 10, 15 minutes lost right in there that we could have had. And you said that we scrambled one fighter. Fighters should scramble in pairs. That's the military. And when you talked earlier about what I thought about this thing, something stinks, because fighters, you always got your wingman. You always have your wingman there. You're not going up a single flight into a hostile territory. Why do we only scramble one? Why didn't we pop the attack helicopters we have sitting at Andrews up with Stingers on board, where they could just pop right up within 2 minutes? The protection, the curtain would be up around Washington. Why weren't those up? You know, there's a lot that just stinks to high heaven. And
Chip, there's another issue here, and Jim Fetzer will go into this. When we're talking about the World Trade Center, it's one thing that I've brought up over and over, and we certainly published on convincingly to professionals, and this is our issue maybe. But there's absolutely nothing a flying airliner can do to a large steel building. I'm sorry. It's nothing. There is no possible effect. You cannot knock down a steel frame building.
If you watch them putting the aircraft together, anyone can go to the Boeing site and watch them putting the wings on that aircraft. The first thing you're going to do is those things are going to shear off. That's a fact. They're going to be left behind somewhere. They're not going to go into that building. They're going to be sheared off. That tail's going to be sheared off. That whole back section's going to be sheared off.
At 500 feet off the ground, as soon as you get an aircraft over 300 miles an hour, your fly-by-wire system will go into a meltdown, and the controls on the aircraft, according to the many pilots I've talked to, and these are, airline pilots who have experience flying multiple U.S. aircraft from fighter attack bombers to transport, you'll have no control of the plane. No pilot who could do it. Then the other issue, and as we go this, the plane would have fallen at 500 miles an hour in low air. A plane will dissolve to potato chips. There's no way a plane could stay together. The other point being is why even talk about this? Here's the analogy I was given by a physicist, that knocking down one of the twin towers with an aircraft would be the same as hitting a garbage truck with a ping pong ball. That's the weight dynamic you have. And that all day long you can do that. No possible effect. You could not have damaged, significantly bent a single beam on the World Trade Center by hitting it with an aircraft going, if it could go 560 miles an hour, which it obviously could not. It
basically a hollow aluminum sphere.
A hollow aluminum sphere against, in this case, minimally, to pass through the building like this, you would have had to have sheared off 60 beams, 4-sided beams, and each side has steel the thickness of the armor on a T-34 tank. Enough to turn most artillery shells. And airplanes, we're talking fly on the windshield dynamics here, okay? That's all you would have had is fly on the windshield. Plane hit, pieces of plane wreckage fly between the beams, some fuel flow in, burn some people in the building. The rest of the plane would have fallen to the ground and landed on traffic, which, frankly, there's not that much traffic in sped into Manhattan because there's nowhere you can park and nowhere you can go. But it would have landed on the road. I don't care how fast he was going. No other scenario possible.
One thing, Gordon, and no one's ever answered my question. I've asked this to several people. You know, we spend in aircraft crashes hundreds of thousands of dollars and sometimes millions of dollars in efforts to recover a couple things off that aircraft. What would those couple things be? Black boxes, right? Voice recorders, aircraft recorders, the black boxes. Millions and millions we can spend. You know, plane crashes off of South America, plane crashes maybe in the South Pacific somewhere. but they'll look and look and look, or they'll pretend to look for those black boxes and spend assets and spend buku bucks trying to find those particular items. Where are the black boxes? Where's the gold?
Now they did.
That's simple of a question for me. Where's
jump
the gold?
in here, Gene. Remember, they kept digging and digging and digging in the rubble until the firemen said suddenly, as they're looking for bodies, they found this big, huge pile of melted down gold. That 200 million I heard that was in the building. Now, all of a sudden, the firemen then are ordered by Giuliani, the mayor, an apex stooge, to do what? Back off. And the cops and the firemen got in fights over it. Interesting.
Yep, but to this day, I haven't heard anything about them trying to recover from all the rubble, from everything that they took apart, trying to recover those two little black boxes.
Oh, they never did say that.
In the tail of the aircraft, it would have been outside. It wouldn't have been inside.
I just want to bring up real quick to you both, Gordon and Gene. Susan cannot be found. She was supposed to be our special guest, had to run to the Capitol Hill today. She may have been detained, who knows. And Jim Fetzer got delayed on another program by an hour. He was supposed to do it the first hour, and he's been delayed. So he may join us the last 10 or 15 minutes and may not. So it looks like it's us three here. Go ahead, Gene.
Well, I've had my say, Stu. I just don't think I can add a whole lot more, other because, like I said, I was in South America at the time of 9/11, enjoying life, and my ex-CIA buddy, who was the Minister of Intelligence in Costa Rica at the time, called me and said, "You got to turn on your TV and see what's going on back in New York." And so I turned it on, and I saw this was, I guess, 3 hours after it had happened. I started seeing videos of what was shown, and I've heard a lot. I mean, I've heard a lot of different theories on what went on, and the only thing I can stick with, and I haven't gone into in depth in any of the theories of what went on, is that something went on and something stinks, and it's just it was too. And working for the people that I'd worked for before, I knew that they would have to take control of the United States in some way, and take control of the laws of the United States, and that just seems to be too perfect for them to be able to use and utilize and install the Patriot Act and other acts. When Congress can never vote on anything, all of a sudden they can vote on that. It's just too perfect. Just like this beheading, it's just too perfect. It's something that can pull all these guys together. Finally, you know, they've I guess. The powers that be have hit on something on how to get the country behind giving up their rights, and I hate to see it. I tell you, I hate to see it, guys.
Gene, touch on who you used to work for. We're going to have to hit break here in a minute or two, but go ahead and tell everybody who you worked for as a black ops. CIA, NSA, DIA.
Service with the government in 1970. I worked for the Nixon administration. I worked on the China trip and several Asian trips after that. I worked on the NASA program under the Defense Intelligence Agency and NASA. I was a wandering asset for Defense Intelligence Agency and for the CIA for over 20 years. I was a special operations pilot in Grenada, and I was one of the command pilots in what is now called the Iran-Contra affair in South America, flying under the orders of Oliver North, General Secord was involved there, as were Felix Rodriguez. That's who I am. I was charged with treason in 1992. Finally overcame that, but not after spending several years in federal prison awaiting the outcome.
Now we're back, folks. This is Veterans Today Radio News Reports. I'm your host, Stu Webb. My special guests, Gene Chip Tatum and Gordon Duff. Now, Gordon, are you still with us? Gordon, are you still with us? Or did you run to grab coffee? Gene, you're still there, aren't you?
I'll take mine with 2 sugars.
The question I've always had is, where did the airplanes go that supposedly were hijacked? That's a subject I want to touch on for a moment. From what I heard from Ellen Mariani, one of the widows, her husband was supposedly in one of the airplanes that crashed into either the North Tower or the South Tower on the day of 9/11. She claims that a reporter, and she had sent it to me, and I was looking for the story. I've got it buried on disk, and it's not on this computer. But she had sent me an article that she had found, and she's still suing them, by the way. She found that a reporter, and she had actually talked to him with the Associated Press. It was in an airport in Ohio, and I don't remember which city it was in Ohio, that she claims the reporter said he saw that airplane land as he's watching the TV reports on the day of 9/11, shortly thereafter, and he sees the tail section, and he sees the number on there saying, wait a minute, that plane just crashed in the World Trade Center, and it just landed here and went to a NASA building on down this airstrip.
You're talking about Cleveland.
Is that Cleveland? You want to explain to Gordon, pick it up for a minute?
Well, excuse me here, I'm also eating lunch. I just stuck down a habanero pepper, so those who know what those things are know what I've just done. But the John Glenn NASA Center is at the Cleveland Airport, and it's a second airport at the Cleveland Airport. They have the ability to land and hangar any commercial aircraft there under military security. I can't swear this story is true, because heaven forbid, we've had so many conspiracy theories thrown at us, nanothermites, whatever, that people just pull out of thin air. Is this true? I don't know, and it may very, very well be true. Planes have to go somewhere. I don't believe that under the circumstances, based on the speeds, trajectories, the behavior of NORAD, all the things Chip's saying, there's no way real hijacked airliners could have flown around the country and been the places they were supposed to be in real life. It's so implausible, it's unimaginable. And then, of course, we have this minor issue where an airliner with a few thousand gallons of kerosene, which is barely capable of singeing wallboard, suddenly causes the world's largest building, and these two of them, to vaporize in a 10,000th of a second from a kerosene fire. Ethylene glycol and kerosene. That's what jet fuel is. If you get burning jet fuel on your hands, here's what I recommend to do. Get a towel, smother the fire, wipe it off, then go put your hand under the faucet for a while, or you'll end up with a burn. That's how dangerous jet fuel is. Can actually stick my hand in jet fuel, put a match to it, match won't light it, catch it on fire, and unless I put the fire out, and I've got, frankly, more time than you'd guess, I'm going to cause soot in the kitchen, but I'm not going to be injured. Now, this whole thing, watching this thing, the insanity of this, all I could think of, this is what Chip was saying here. we knew they were going to do it. All of us knew what they were going to do. You know, what I'd like to get from Chip, and I know he doesn't want to talk about these things. Chip had talked about the treason charges. I'd like to hear some of the specifics on this, if Chip is free to go into this. That's an if. I can just tell you're working for the same organization at one point in, let's say, the middle of this period from Iran-Contra, where I walked into my office one morning and someone was sitting in my office with a 4-pocket shirt on, Chip, that happened to be at one of the top of our list there as one of the heads of the Cali cartel. He's sitting in my office. And you don't get to my office unless you pass people who carry guns, whose only job it is to make sure you don't get to my office. A U.S. senator would have had a couple of questions to get to my office. That I arrive in the morning and a cartel, one of the heads of the cartel, is sitting in my office, directed by people in Washington who didn't have the guts to call me and warn me that I'm there to do his bidding. Chip, you carry it from there.
Well, there I was sitting in my office. You know, I worked for intelligence from the time I was just a young man, just in the military, and I worked directly for Bill Colby before he was the director of the CIA, when he was Ambassador Colby, as they called him, as a station chief in Vietnam, and he took me under his wing, and he tried to protect me after Operation Red Rock, where we were on a false flag mission and a one-way suicide mission. It ended up being that we survived. That 3 of us, and then 2 of us, and now none of us. 1 of us has survived. And from that time on, I became an asset, being held close to the White House. Colby told me, you know, son, Nixon doesn't trust you. The whole administration doesn't trust you. They can't let this information get out. As you continue in service, you need to protect yourself, and this is how you're going to do it. And he taught me how to protect myself, how to make recordings, how to save documents. Then later on, I even got some neat hardware that allowed me to do even more. So I did that, and I collected this stuff. I mean, I worked on the mission with going to China. We recorded things that happened in China in the Air Force One. We recorded instances of Kissinger and his meetings with the Chinese officials and with officials from other countries. I recorded certain things with NASA that went on in NASA, and then even in my military documents, it talks about me being a key figure with Southeast Asian operations and getting out of there. I worked with, like I say, NASA, recording certain things that happened there, and I worked in the OSG's operational subgroups. We worked hand in hand with the Mossad, hand in hand with MI6, hand in hand with Turkish intelligence, hand in hand with Spanish intelligence, recording, videotaping, hand in hand with Ollie North, with my immediate boss in the OSGs, George H.W. Bush, collecting data, protecting myself.
Now, Chip, let me jump in here. My impression at some point, I looked at my own background, and my father was a member of the Communist Party. I had, let's say, a delightful excess of information. I was the CIA's chief recruiter during the 70s was James Hooker, and this was our China specialist was Paul Varg, probably the greatest China scholar in American history. These were among my mentors, Harold Marcus, but the Michigan State Wesley Fischel from, I don't know if did you ever meet Fischel, by the way? Chip?
Hello?
Chip, did you ever meet Wesley Fischel?
No, I haven't. I know the name, but I never met. Well, I shouldn't
Fischel,
say that. There's a lot of people I've met that didn't use that name also.
Well, Fischel ran the U.S. mission to Vietnam before Westmoreland took over. Fischel's the one who Fischel came to light. We go back in his history. In 1946, Fischel was a translator for General MacArthur in Tokyo. Fischel was a fanatic Roman Catholic. He brought MacArthur a young Catholic Vietnamese named Diem and presented him to MacArthur as a potential U.S. asset. And of course, Diem later showed up with a bullet in his head inside an M113 armored personnel carrier after, let's say, being involved in hopelessly descending the U.S. into the quagmire of Vietnam. But the government of South Vietnam was set up, their police, their military, all of it by Michigan State University in what was called MSUG, the Michigan State University Group. And MSU worked hand in hand with the CIA, but MSU sent over professors to train every aspect of Vietnamese government, from secret police, set up secret prisons, intelligence systems, military. It was all done, and eventually what was the Westmoreland compound, the Disneyland for Americans there, the early Green Zone. The Green Zone had been the MSUG compound before Westmoreland had taken it over. But what I remember most, the going to work every day, the kind of things. One is being sent to meetings without any briefing at all with people who wanted to kill you. Almost like a joke, And the other one is that every day you didn't know when you were going to be arrested. Working for the CIA every single
always
day.
looking over your shoulder.
Every day you thought you were being set up. Every day you heard about somebody being picked up for taking a bribe of some kind, or for passing on equipment or information or whatever. But everyone was continually being tested and watched and set up somehow. And you never knew, and this is what I see with you here, you never knew whether you were really a golden boy or that you were the next Oswald, because you couldn't tell which label they put on you, whether you were meant for better things or you were meant for a bigger fall. And that was there all the time. And if you felt sick to your stomach waiting for the other shoe to drop every day, that means you were working for the Central Intelligence Agency.
I know the feeling well, Gordon. I absolutely know it well.
Gene, I'll just ask you, kind of change subject off 911 for a minute. We're talking about CIA. Colonel Catola and Colonel Carone, there was a affidavit on both, and William Tyree, you're familiar with him, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, can we even touch this? William Tyree versus Central Intelligence Agency, L. Scott Harshbarger, A. Paul Celluci, George Bush, and Doris Jean Tatum. Wouldn't happen to be you, would it?
That might happen to be me.
Hey, let me toss, since we're on air here, and this is just a fishing expedition, and we won't. This will be just a tweak. I do things to tweak the NSA occasionally to make sure that they're on. I'll ask for a couple of people if you'd ever run into them. One would be Dewey Orston. Have you run into Dewey Orston?
I don't think so. But
okay.
Listen, you guys have to show me pictures. I mean, I had 16 different names, so for me to run into someone.
Dewey, and then let's say we would have Leonard Grossman or Eduardo Leonardi or Dr. Leonard Grossman. Any familiarity there?
There is some there.
Okay, and that would be a Argentinian passport, worked in Cyprus for Mossad for a number of years, assassinated in probably, I'm thinking 1984, was murdered in Miami. That was my partner.
Uh-huh.
And we'll let that one go.
Did you do that?
No, actually, I didn't do that. It's a story. I can tell the story now. This is if we were to go into the TV show Burn Notice. This is the Bruce Campbell character from Burn Notice. Is Dr. Eduardo Leonardi, who is actually a cardiologist, and I would actually ride around Miami sometimes with Lenny. Lenny would actually hang out the window with his Mac 10 and fire it into the air sometimes just for something to do. In my Volvo, that and screaming Cuban women. He was a maniac. He had a huge child support issue, and he was kept with me as a partner. Typically, he spoke 11 languages, and I speak 6 or 7 of them, but most of them at a restaurant or below quality. I was considered, even my English isn't that good, but language challenged. And this is somebody who can speak everything, plus had a great sense of humor. Well, as an Israeli, longtime Mossad, he needed cash. And the only way to get cash, to him anyway, and as he's a physician, was to sell poisons. Which I remember the day he explained that to me, thinking, well, Gordon, there's a lot of risk in this, and I hope they don't find out. And I have this habit of not snitching, actually, which is pretty good. But, people have people they have to get rid of, and everybody dies eventually somehow, and we have available, through my friends in Mossad, a lot of undetectable poisons. And, a lot of people, it's an easy way to get through a divorce, and I was wondering if this is what had brought on his demise at some point. You ever work in Miami yet, Chip?
Well, I did. We took out a guy named Ramon Navarro in Miami. Yes.
Should I ask where you did this?
It was in 1991 on the streets. He had a hell of an accident.
Yeah, because often the choices would be typically in and around off Brickell Avenue for accidents near the MacArthur Causeway, the Holiday Inn down there. Their parking lots. Those were favorite accident zones, and then they were either left there, or if they were accidented too publicly, they would be driven out Alligator Alley and dumped.
It was easy back in the old days. Now they've got it all fenced off.
Oh yeah, you could just see the dumping areas there where the vehicles turn off the road, and of course the local sheriffs down there or highway patrol. They've gotten so used to seeing the cars they'd actually wave when you went past. But,
gentlemen, we got about 30, 45 seconds left.
We haven't been able to get a hold of Susan here.
We never got a hold of her. She never has gotten in. I've called her numbers the whole bit. She's missing in action. And Mr. Fetzer, they delayed a show that he was on by a full hour. So we've got about 30 seconds. Wrap it up, Gordon or Gene.
Gene, go ahead and deal with it. I've been eating up too much time anyway.
Okay,
no, that's the end of the show right there.
Website at chiptatum.com and download those 9/11 documents. They're free for you to read and go through, so you can see what stinks in Denmark.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. It's been the Veterans Today Radio News Reports. Have a good day. This is September the 10th. Tomorrow, September the 11th.